All right, grab your trowel and brush and welcome to this explainer. Today we're literally dusting off the sands of time to uncover one of the Bronze Age's most extensive, yet honestly deeply enigmatic societies, the Indus Valley Civilization. I want you to imagine walking right into an active excavation trench, using ground-penetrating radar and just a simple brush, to slowly reveal a sprawling metropolis that's been hiding under the dirt for millennia. Because that is exactly the journey we are going on today. Now, picture the sheer shock in the archaeological community back in 1924. Sir John Marshall steps up and declares, "Not often has it been given to archaeologists to light upon the remains of a long-forgotten civilization." And he hit the nail on the head. Before the 1920s, no one had any clue that these incredibly ancient, massive ruins in the Indian subcontinent even existed. Finding them completely reset the entire timeline of human history in the region.
And that brings us to the ultimate mystery we're unpacking right now. How exactly does a Bronze Age society, boasting an estimated population of between 1 and 5 million people, manage to build the ancient world's largest civilization by geographic spread, only to just seemingly vanish? Seriously, how do you misplace up to 5 million people? Let's dig into the strata of their history to find out. To really understand them, we've got to map out their stratigraphy. The timeline of this civilization shows us it definitely didn't just pop up overnight. It grew steadily from early farming communities around 7000 BCE, building into the early Harappan phase. Then, from 2600 to 1900 BCE, we hit the absolute gold mine, the mature Harappan phase. This is where their incredible urban integration peaked, right before it slowly declined and fractured into the post-Harappan phase. Well, it all started right here at Mehergar. This Neolithic site dating back to roughly 7000 BCE gives us the absolute earliest, undisputed evidence of farming and herding in South Asia. And what's really fascinating here is that this wasn't just some imported idea. They independently domesticated indigenous crops like barley and local zebu cattle. You can think of Mehergar as the Silicon Valley of Bronze Age farming. It's the foundational bedrock that made those later megacities possible.
So let's talk about their geographic footprint, because it was absolutely massive. It spanned a core of 1,500 kilometers along the Indus Plain. We're talking about far-flung outposts up north in Afghanistan, all the way down south to Maharashtra. With over 1,000 settlements reported, it stretched from the mountains of Baluchistan straight down to the coastline of Gujarat. And this massive environmental diversity was a huge advantage. It meant they could leverage mountain minerals, river plains for farming, and coastal access for trade. The whole shebang.
Now, this next point is really where the Indus Valley completely breaks the mold. When you compare them to their contemporaries, like Egypt and Mesopotamia, a crazy, stark contrast emerges. While Egypt and Mesopotamia were funneling their wealth into massive, monumental architecture for the elites, think grand temples and royal palaces, the Indus Valley completely lacks conclusive evidence of either. It's astonishing. Instead, they put their energy into highly standardized, incredibly egalitarian urban planning.
Which brings us to the citadel. Every major Indus city had one of these raised, walled areas. But because we don't find those obvious royal palaces or grand temples inside them, archaeologists are actually still debating what they were even for. Were they military defenses? Were they elevated platforms to keep the city safe from volatile summer monsoons and floods? Or maybe specialized civic buildings? It's still a really captivating puzzle in the field.
Okay, here's the really mind-blowing part, their architecture. These people were absolute master builders. Their forward-looking focus on public health and water management was just unprecedented. They laid out entire cities on strict grid patterns using uniformed baked bricks. They built the world's first known covered drainage and sewage systems right into the streets. We literally wouldn't see that level of public sanitation again until the Roman Empire. Individual homes had their own wells and private courtyards. And of course, there's the Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, which is this total marvel of waterproof engineering, probably used for ritual purification.
Now take a look at this number, 1.704 millimeters. That's a tiny fraction of an inch, and it's the extraordinarily precise smallest division on a Bronze Age ivory scale we discovered at the coastal site of Lothal. In fact, it is the smallest division ever recorded on a scale from the entire Bronze Age. These folks achieved an astonishing level of accuracy when measuring length, mass, and time.
And their obsession with measurement didn't stop at length. Take a look at their chert weights. They followed a super strict, highly uniform 5:2 to 1 decimal ratio across their entire territory. This staggering level of standardization isn't just some neat mathematical trick. It practically proves they had a highly organized central planning authority, because you simply cannot maintain that kind of uniform metrology across thousands of kilometers of trade networks without definitive regulation from authorities.
Sifting through the artifacts of their metallurgy tells an equally impressive story. They were master smiths. They produced copper tools, they alloyed bronze with tin, arsenic, and lead. We've even found touchstones used for testing gold purity over in Banawali. But you want to know the most surprising part? Access to these bronze and copper goods was relatively widespread across the society. This wasn't an economy where the top 1% hoarded all the metal. Everyday artisans actually had access to these advanced materials.
Let's shift gears and look at how these cities connected to the rest of the world. The Indus economy was a deeply integrated machine. You had these massive inland urban trade hubs like Harappa driving all the production, while coastal sites like Lothal hooked them up to global markets. Lothal actually features this massive brick basin that a lot of excavators believe was a functioning dockyard. This setup let middlemen merchants run complex maritime trade routes, connecting their settlements directly to foreign markets as far away as Mesopotamia.
But what was life actually like for the everyday citizen living in those brick neighborhoods? The artifacts beautifully show us a society that actually had the luxury of leisure time. We dig up terracotta toys shaped like little carts and whistling birds. We find cubicle dice with 1 to 6 holes on them, literally just like the ones we play board games with today. And while their exact domestic gender roles are still a bit of a mystery, we find female figurines with red manga in the parting of their hair, a custom still practiced in modern India, hinting at vibrant family life. Plus, all of this was sustained by really smart multi-seasonal farming, growing rice in the summer and wheat and barley in the winter.
And their art, literally so advanced it defied belief at the time. When Sir John Marshall unearthed statuettes like the bronze dancing girl and the red jasper Harappa torso, the guy was in sheer archaeological shock. He wrote that he found it difficult to even believe they were prehistoric, noting an anatomical truth that was basically unheard of in the ancient world before the Hellenistic Greeks. It completely rewrote the book on early human art.
But for all that expressive art, they left us with the ultimate locked door, their writing system. We've recovered thousands of these short inscriptions, mainly on trade seals featuring up to 600 distinct symbols. But despite decades of intense computer analysis and linguistic study, the Indus script remains totally undeciphered. Scholars are constantly debating if its roots are Dravidian or early Indo-Aryan, but right now, it still fiercely guards the truth of their language, their government, and their names. So, without a deciphered script, we're forced to carefully read the artifacts to understand their spiritual life. And trust me, it is hotly debated. We have the famous Pashupati seal, showing a horned figure seated in what looks like a yogic posture, surrounded by animals. We find seals of heroes fighting tigers, which echoes Mesopotamian myths. We know they practiced fractional burial and even cremation. But again, that conspicuous lack of massive monumental temples suggests their religious ceremonies were probably confined to smaller shrines, the open air, or just inside individual homes.
So what went wrong? How did this thriving, highly organized society collapse? Well, when we examine skeletons from the late Harappan phase, the physical evidence paints a pretty grim picture. Toward the end, we see a distinct sudden spike in interpersonal violence. And sadly, that high-density urban lifestyle eventually became a trap. As the sanitation systems failed, the skeletal remains show a drastic increase in infectious diseases like leprosy and tuberculosis. The whole centralized system was just breaking down.
What actually pulled the trigger on this collapse? Modern environmental soil strata point to an abrupt, 4,200-year-old megadrought. Walk through this ecological chain reaction with me. First, the crucial monsoon rainfall systems gradually shifted southward and just tapered off. Without that steady rain, the massive Gogger-Hacker river system began to literally dry up. Because of that, the summer floods became highly erratic, completely ruining their sustainable agriculture. Ultimately, unable to feed those megacities, the population was forced to flee and migrate eastward toward the Ganges Basin.
And that initiated what we call the late Harappan phase. The major cities were gradually abandoned. Those deeply integrated urban trade networks broke down into isolated rural communities. And without a central authority keeping things running, the sophisticated amenities just vanished. The covered drains failed, the uniform weights disappeared, the undeciphered script ceased to be written, and we even see evidence of deliberate vandalism of stone sculptures. That great sweeping integration had completely localized. Now, shifting back to our reality in the field today, finding all this history is really only half the battle. Preserving it? That's a massive, ongoing challenge. Excavated baked brick ruins, especially at places like Mohenjo-Daro, are incredibly fragile when they're exposed to the elements and salty soil. Today, we rely heavily on non-invasive techniques like 3D scanning, just to document and protect these structures so future research can even happen.
It takes huge international efforts from UNESCO alongside German, Italian, and US teams, all racing against time to save them.
All right, let's brush off the dust and actually organize our field notes. Here is a definitive review summary of everything we excavated today.
So here are your major takeaways. The big urban centers included Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Dolavara, Lothal, and Rakhigarhi. Their architectural innovations were absolutely stunning. Egalitarian grid planning, baked bricks, covered street drainage, and hyper-standardized weights. Their economy was this powerhouse driven by multi-cropping and expansive maritime trade linking them to Mesopotamia. And finally, their decline. It wasn't some massive war that took them down. It was a devastating climate shift that dried up their rivers and collapsed their trade networks. Which leaves us with this really haunting but fascinating thought. If a Bronze Age civilization of millions, a society that prioritized public health, advanced sanitation, egalitarian housing, and peaceful trade over vanity monuments, can be entirely erased by a shifting climate and drying rivers, what ancient ruins are we building today? Thank you so much for exploring the Indus Valley civilization with me in this explainer. Keep digging, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.